Well, thank you for standing by. Today's call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. All participants are in listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, you may press star 1 on your phone to ask a question. I would now like to turn the conference over to your host, Dr. Heather Brown. Thank you. Begin.
Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the webinar. Today we have a very exciting topic about a new toolkit that we have produced and a new portal to support it. Irene Skricky, who is our senior financial analyst, financial education analyst at the Bureau, is going to be making the presentation. And I wanted to just let everyone know that if you gave your email address at the beginning of the call when you dialed in, I will get a list and I will send you, everyone on that list, a copy of the slides. If you didn't, you can just email our CFPB Phoenix mailbox. If anybody did not receive advance notice of this event, then you're probably not on our list, and you also want to email the mailbox and ask to be placed on our email list so that you'll get advance notice. All the announcements I have, so I can leave time so that you can get the information you came for. And at that, I'm going to hand it over to Irene. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Heather, and welcome to everybody on the webinar. It's good to be back on a Phoenix webinar. I'm Anais Gonzalez here in the Office of Financial Education, and we have a I personally am very excited about financial well-being scale and how practitioners can use it. I know we have done webinars on this general topic of the scale before, but we have some new resources to announce. We also have a special guest speaker who has been using the scale in her program, which I think will be very, very cool, who will come later. So let's jump in. So first, as government employees, we always have to start off with the disclaimer that while this is being made on behalf of a CFPB representative, it does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice, and any opinions stated are our own and not represent the CFPB's views. Almost everyone on the call probably knows who we are, but actually we're back now to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Our name has had a couple changes in the last year, but we're the same agency. We regulate the offering and provision of consumer financial products and services and educate and empower consumers to make better informed financial decisions. And it is, of course, that latter part of the sentence about educating and empowering consumers. That is what our office does and what our financial well-being work is all about. Just building on what Heather said about Phoenix, it is a online and in-person opportunity to get access to our tools and to learn what we're doing and to share what you're doing. And so we have regular webinars, convenings, and whatnot. And to sign up, Heather mentioned if you're not getting a regular newsletter that says CFPB News and Updates, there's you can email, which is at the bottom of this slide, CFPB_Phoenix@CFPB.gov. You can also do it directly online, and I'll show you that. Our kind of one-stop shop for our financial education resources, the resources for financial educators page has a sign-up box on the right side where you can put your email address in and automatically be signed up for Phoenix notifications of events and webinars. So a little bit of background about Phoenix and why we are here today. And so today's topic is using the CFPB Financial Wellbeing Scale. We have several new things we will be showing you today, including some new benchmarks that I think will be very cool. And we'll have a special surprise at the end. For anyone interested in research, I have a surprise slide at the end. So this is an incentive for all of you to stick with us on the webinar and see what my surprise is. What we will be, so I'm going to start off by just doing a very quick review of how we got here. Now, those of you who have been using the scale or have been on previous webinars will know this, so I will say very little, but just as kind of a continuum, we started off several years ago. Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm not going to do that yet. First, I'm going to just show you what we'll be doing today is looking at the new toolkit, getting started with measuring financial well-being, the pretty blue cover on the left, and a new web page where we have put all of our financial well-being resources, including the toolkit, in sort of digitized form on one place, so you can find things more easily. And all of this just launched a week ago today, so it's all brand new, and we will go through it. So, as I was saying, we'll do a little quick review, which is that we put together or developed a consumer-derived definition for financial well-being as an end goal for financial education several years ago. Again, many of you have seen this, but it is a four-part definition of control over your day-to-day, month-to-month finances, have capacity to absorb a financial shock, being on track to meet your financial goals, and having the financial freedom to make choices to enjoy life. Those four things which can be thought of as security and freedom of choice in the present and the future. And again, that's something we've been kind of using as a starting point for, or really a point for all the financial education work that anyone is doing should help people be better off in the long run in some or all of these different elements. Once defined it, our next task was to figure out how to measure it, and it's a financial well-being scale. I put it up here quickly. Now, we're going to spend more time on it later, but you can see it's 10 questions. This was rigorously validated with 13,000 people or so, lots of research on how to make this actually measure people's their own sense of where they are in financial well-being. So you see, it doesn't have numbers. It doesn't ask your income or your credit score. It asks where you think you are on managing your money, and questions are phrased in ways to kind of get at some of the underlying emotions and senses of where you are. Again, we'll talk more about how to use this, but that is the scale. The step we did after that was we did a large-scale survey with the scale, a nationally representative survey a couple of years ago, and also asked a number of other questions about people's financial circumstances, behaviors, demographics, and used that to get a picture of the state of financial well-being in America. That came out about a year and a half ago or so, and we found that also the score itself, but the averages on a scale of 1 to 100 is 54, and we had some basic sense of about a third of people are kind of in the middle, a third on the lower half, under 50, and a third above 60, and that gave us some loose sense of what the score meant. But hold that for a minute, because we have more refined benchmarks coming up later in this webinar. But this was where we were a couple of years ago. One more kind of research piece, which to then do some controlling for different variables and holding income constant to see how people's well-being varied if they had the same income or other circumstances, to understand what people were doing to be in a better financial position. And we came up with the Pathways report. It's actually a complicated statistical thing, but this is the shorthand for it, these four pretty boxes. This was released last fall, and basically found that financial skill, which is how you find, process, and use information, along with financial confidence, self-efficacy, leads to financial behavior, day-to-day actions you take, which leads to better financial situation or the objective facts of your financial life, which leads to financial well-being. Nothing you look at this and won't say, well, you know, that makes sense, that makes perfect sense. But I think the interesting thing really was the financial piece, is that, and that, because that is something we believe can be taught. So even if you have different circumstances or start with different incomes, financial skill is something that you can learn from a financial educator, like the folks on this phone call, and can then potentially apply to your life. So the last thing I'll show, and we're not going to delve into this today, but we did have a webinar on it in the fall, is if you see financial skill, you say, how did you measure that? There is another scale. Mostly talking about the financial well-being scale. We've done a lot more with that, but there is a second scale called the financial skill scale. Also self-reported, people's sense of how they're doing, so we're not actually watching them do financial tasks. But financial skill scale, this is also available. It's something you can use if you want. We have put out a report on it. We hope to do more, but there's another 10 questions asking people if they think they know how to make financial decisions, they know how to follow through on their intentions, they can recognize a good financial investment. So just a tool for you to think about, read more about. We won't really talk more about it today, except to say you can find it on the hub that we will show you later. So kind of where we've been over the last few years. What we found is, well, we really developed the scale as a research tool, and researchers have been using it. It's been put in some other large-scale surveys done by the federal government and other entities. But of course, we also found that practitioners, folks working with consumers, like probably most of the people on this call, are also using the scale. as a tool, and that people were having interesting experiences. Sometimes they were struggling with aspects of it. So we said, why don't we figure out how to help people use it better and help us learn how you all are using it so we can better understand too. So that was what led us to create this toolkit that we're going to talk about. I will say before I start on that is that we're learning. So we're going to give you some tips and some ideas and things we've heard from practitioners, but we can't say the absolute best way to use it is to do this, this, and this, right? It's still under development. It's also going to vary by program. So different programs are going to want to use it differently. So there's no absolute answer. There are some things are good to do. There are some things that are going to vary based on your program. So we don't have definitive answers, but we have a starting point, and I would actually love to learn from all of you who are using it or starting to use it or have been using it, experiences you're having. So hopefully we'll have opportunities to do that in the future. So I'm going to do a quick view of how to use the scale, very quick, because again, I know some of you are using it, but we found in some early research in creating this toolkit that quite a few people were using it in idiosyncratic ways or didn't understand the scoring procedure, or in some cases didn't know why certain things were the way they were, and so we just wanted to run through that. So there's two parts to the scale. Again, review for some of you, but there is the 10 questions, the questionnaire, and then you have to score it separately. We actually found a few folks who didn't realize you had to score it, in part because the physical scale and the scoring worksheet in different documents, so we've since combined them. But so I will just show you a few things. But the questionnaire itself has the 10 questions. It also has a question about age and about the mode of administration. So for age, just to explain, we in the early research found that the definition or the WIS score was a little bit different for folks who were older, probably because there's different financial goals, right? You're more likely to be in an asset decumulation phase. You may have different longer-term goals. So there's the scale itself is the same. You just use a different scoring worksheet, and that will make the numbers comparable between younger and older. But age is one criteria. The other one that's quite intriguing is this mode of administration, which is that do you read it to yourself? Do you take the quiz yourself, the questions? Or does somebody sit down with you, like a coach, and do it with you? And you might say, why would that matter? Well, it turns out that people's brains actually process information differently. This isn't just something we found. This is something that is a known thing with researchers, that listening to a question read to you versus reading it, you just process it the same way. You kind of forget the earlier option, so you answer it slightly differently. So to make it equivalent so that either way you take the test, you get the same score, which is what you want, right, as a single well-being score. The scoring is it's the same process, but there's a different worksheet, a different table for it. So that's the reason people are always like, really, I would answer differently, and apparently people do. That way it evens out, so you will get the same score however you do it. And then with the scoring sheet, again, you'll end up with a score between 0 and 100. So that quickly, there is also an abbreviated well-being scale. It's 5 questions. It's 5 of the 10. It's scored the same way. The longer version is a little more precise and may provide some more insight, but they both will be used to generate approximately the same score. So if you don't want to ask as many questions, you can use the 5-question version. I'll show you where to find that later. A couple of tips on that. We've heard from some practitioners that it's helpful to try out the scale before you actually start using it to see how people react to it. Your clients, you can even try it out on your colleagues to get a better sense of how you're going to present to people, but that can help before just like dropping on everybody. It's also important to allow people to interpret the questions for themselves. So even though them are a little, people sometimes struggle with what the question means, if you interpret it, you actually are going to change score, and that's not what you want. We encourage people to try to tell the person taking the test, well, what does that mean to you? Do your best with it, and not sort of over-interpret for them or say, I think you should answer the question this way. if it's possible, you can give people the choice to complete the questionnaire so they don't feel like they have to, although that's not, it's not feasible in every program where you have data collection you need to do. But also, of course, it's important to ensure them that their responses will be kept confidential vis-a-vis the broader public. I mean, that's, people are concerned about privacy, so that will hopefully make them feel more comfortable answering. And then the scoring process is a little complicated. There is an online version I'll show you. So that is another option that may be easier for some folks. So just quickly, this is the questionnaire. Again, many of you have seen it, possibly used it. This is the paper version. I know on the screen. Screens don't always look that good, but it's the same 10 questions you saw earlier. At the bottom, it's a question about age and how it was administered, and people check off whether they're completely very well, whether these things describe them, how it applies to them. Just so you can see it, the online version, which is on the site, is here. In theory, this thing is animated, but you won't actually see the moves. You'll just have to take my word for it, because the first screen, which is sort of at the back of the slide, is the 10 questions. You would actually go and click on the boxes, and so people can do that. It's scored automatically for you, and out pops the pretty colored bar. Again, you can only see part of it. That shows you your score against the national average with color coding that's indicative that, green is better, red is worse, but it doesn't put any sort of labels on people to hopefully alleviate any concerns they might have about what the score telling them that they're doing terribly. So that's the online version, and programs, people can use it on their own, but programs can also use it to do scoring immediately. It doesn't store data, it can't keep it for you, but you can at least get the score right away. And you'll see the value of that when you see the next the next slide, which is that the next step in scoring, hand scoring, is you have to take the questionnaire that the person filled out and copy over, circle the numbers on this little numerical thing here. There's a sample of it, which you get a first part of a number. You have to actually say, oh, they answered very well, and that's a 1 on here. If you carefully, which you probably can't on this tiny version, but if you see the paper version, some questions are reverse coded, which means that some are phrased positively, like I am securing my financial future. Some are intentionally phrased negatively, which is such as I feel like I will never be able to have the things I want. That's intentional. People react a little differently, and you get more nuanced data. But it means when you score it, complete could be a very good or a very bad thing depending on how the question was worded. So you'll note the numbers in the score kind of change as a result. So you just have to be really attentive that you are circling the right things and adding up the numbers, but you add up all the numbers on the right, and you come up with a response value. That is not the well-being score. There's one more step. This is a multi-step process, and then you have to go to a lookup table. This is where there's a different table for whether it's self-administered the questionnaire or whether you, the educator, read it to somebody. And that's where you also see the age distinction. And you actually go to total response value. You go across to the right part of the table, old IRS tax tables, if anyone still does their taxes by hand, and find out the financial well-being score. And you can, it's a little laborious. The pure version of the scale, in a sense, the one that's using add-in response theory, which is a complicated statistical thing, most people will be doing it. A computer actually does an analysis of the pattern of answers, questions and answers, and gives you a score. Anyone who has access to data, which is a statistical package, can score it that way. This is kind of a simpler way to do it. It's sort of shorthand, but it's a little cumbersome as well. And I think the big challenge that a lot of people have raised is that this is harder to automate. You can use our online version, the one I showed you, where you just you click on the boxes and get the number. But doing it within a data collection system, it is possible. We know people who have used different programs to automate the lookup, but in some large data systems that are already that don't have the flexibility, that's presented a challenge for the scoring, and that's something we are aware of. In the future, there may be things that we all can do, but you'll hear that it's easy to ask the questions and get the initial number. It's this lookup part that takes more steps to automate. So sorry if that was getting a bit technical. So, all right, you've done all that, great, whatever. fine. What does it all mean? And so this is where the new stuff comes in that we hope you will find interesting. A lot of people have been using the score scale, but they say, well, we don't know what it means. And the earlier colorful graph that showed you the average was a 54 gave a sense that, below 50 isn't so good and above 60 is better. But we've now done some more detailed analysis to give us more refined benchmarks or score bands. And so what I'm going to show you on the next two slides is the two new things. Again, they are in the toolkit. They're also in a printable form online. I'll get there later. But this is the newest stuff we want to show you. And what we our contractor did was to look at financial well-being scores against other financial characteristics, about how well people were doing. Were they having trouble making ends meet? Were they having issues with their financial resources generally? Some other kind of indicators of financial distress or success. And when you plot all those, of course, the higher your score, the fewer of those things you have. But there are points where there's sort of an inflection where there's a threshold. If you get above a certain score, there seems to be, the slope of the line gets better. There's a very oversimplified version of some complicated statistical stuff. But we did that and came up with some new score bands that I will show you on the next slide. And then we also just put distributions for people, scores by age and income. Because, if you're 25 and just starting off in life and have a low income, you don't want to know how you compare to someone who's, 59 and has been saving their whole life. Or even if they haven't, they just may be in a very different financial place. So people want to compare to someone like them. So there were a couple criteria we were able to do that for, and I'll show you that in a minute as well. So the big reveal, this is not the surprise that will be at the end of the webinar. This is just the new exciting benchmarks. Whoops, sorry, one more slide about that. Just to let you know how we got there. I was saying we took the data we already had from our financial well-being survey and looked at points where people seem to be actually getting over threshold and better. All right, so here's the big reveal. One more slide. These are our new benchmarks. So they fall into such pretty little, it's not like 40 to 50, 50 to 60. They fall on uneven numbers, but this is what we found. We have six new bands, 5 breakpoints. So very low, low, medium, high, high, and very high. The breakpoints are 29, 38. So 29, 37. 49, 57, and 67. So you can see that 0 to 29, people are in a very low. 30 to 37 is low. 38 to 49 is medium low. 50 to 54, which is where the average falls, is medium high. 58 to 67 is high, and 68 and above. And what we did was we just selected some of the characteristics, some of the average characteristics of people who are in that band. So just it gives you a sense that for people in the very low, only 5% are certain that they could come up with emergency, money if they had an emergency. In the middle group, you can see that 8% find it difficult to make ends meet. Sometime in the low, you bump a little bit, you'll find that minority of people pay off their credit cards in full. The higher you get, you'll see different. We kind of chose a set of characteristics just so you can look at. We actually have each types of numbers for each group, but we just picked a selection. You can kind of say, oh, look, it looks like people in the core band have these issues. Maybe we can work with our clients on those. Now, you'll know that from talking directly to the client, but this gives you a sense of where people fall. So we think this will be helpful. We hope this will be helpful for you to better understand what this mean when you have people that you're working with. And from this, we've talked to people working with clients coming in for financial education, many of whom, of course, are struggling. We tend to see a lot of the under 50s, right, in the 38 to 49 or even lower, at least from what we've heard. Now I'll show you the for comparison groups. Again, this is a screenshot, so you can't see very well, and you can't see all of it. But what we've done is we've broken out the side, so the whole first chunk is people less than 30,000. The second chunk is 30 to 50,000, basically 50, and then again it goes further than what you see on the screen. And then we're broken out by age group. You can look at the very first line is people who are age 18 to 29 and less than $30,000. You can see the average score is 45, and then it's broken out in percentile. So you can, if you have a client who comes in and their score is a 48, you can say, hey, you're in the 50th percentile. You're a little above average. So this gives you something so you can better understand how people, where people stand relative to people of their same age and income. We did other factors, some data challenges and issues where there were other things that we were not easily able to do comparison groups for. So these are the two. Online, you can also look at score by employment status, if you're employed, unemployed, in the online version I showed you previously. So I'm going to now just address the $10,000 question here. People are, should you share the score with the people you serve? Score is a valuable tool to measure, obviously, people's financial well-being. Most practitioners, certainly up to this point, have generally, I think, not been sharing the score, right? Partially because we didn't always know some early guidance. These benchmarks we think will be helpful, but you don't want to tell someone they have a 42 and nobody knows what that means. Again, we know more about that now. But also, and this came up a lot when we talked to practitioners, the score could lead people to be anxious or upset. In some cases, it could motivate the person. So what we say is before sharing the score, consider how a person might react, whether sharing the score would help or hinder a person's sense of well-being. So that's really up to you guys. Until these benchmarks, and we don't really have, we haven't yet developed method for consumers. This toolkit is for practitioners. We expect you all to use it to see where your clients stand. You'll have to figure out whether or not it makes sense to share it. I mean, generally, we've had practitioners say that they aren't sharing it. They're not just giving someone a number and then not anything else to say. So over time, maybe we'll have better communications. Maybe all of you will develop things that others could use. But certainly, it's something you want to think hard about whether to share or not. And the materials in the toolkit are meant for you as practitioners to then, figure out whether you want to show them that benchmark chart that I showed you. So a question that's completely answered yet, but something I think everyone is thinking about who's been using the scale. So there are a few ways you can use the scale in your work. Again, a lot of this, hopefully resonate, or you may have tried it yourself, but there are 5 things we'll mention. First, measuring individual well-being and progress. That kind of makes sense. People want to track their clients' scores and the answers to their scores. So you can administer the scale at intake and at regular intervals throughout your sessions if you want to see how people are doing over time. You can keep the scores and the individual question responses too and see how those change over time. And then, of course, now with these benchmarks, you can compare the scores of the people you serve to this national data. Was one of the nicest things about the scale is we do have quite a pool of national data, you now compare different types of clients, different types of programs. You can compare to the national data. In trying to administer the scale, as it's mentioned here, we have a recommendation on that. It really depends on what works for you. What we've heard from practitioners is people tend to do it approximately quarterly. If there's a client, over a longer period of time, again, that's going to vary. Makes sense for you. We hope to learn more about kind of best practices in that over time. But you usually want at least something early in your work with someone so you can see how it changes. So you can do your individual progress. This, number 2, facilitate one-on-one conversations. This is probably the most common thing we hear is that people say, hey, great, score, scale, whatever. We never score it. But we really find that the questions themselves are helpful conversation starters, right? Because it's not about what's your credit score, which is helpful, but doesn't necessarily immediately open up a dialogue. But here, when you ask people, can you afford a birthday gift in any month? Do you feel like your finances control you? That can really be a way to connect with people. As we say here, be prepared for people to react emotionally. Our guest speaker, who will come on later, told me a year or two ago that, and she may repeat this when she speaks, but she said everyone I ask, I admit the scale to, they all cry. They always cry. She said, but I'm prepared to deal with that. I'm a financial coach. I want them to open up. So again, be prepared for that. Some of the questions may make people feel anxious, or they may not, but it is an opportunity to then get people in touch with their own feelings about their money and often get them talking. So this what we found is probably the single most common reason people say that they're using the scale. Second, the third is you can do the same thing in a group setting, though obviously that's a little different. You probably don't want everyone to be in a group. I guess it depends on your group, but you can use it in a workshop setting to have people reflect on the questions and help them engage more deeply with whatever material you're teaching if you're in group settings. And so you could ask workshop attendees to complete the scale before the workshop starts, or you could do it. You could link relevant scale questions to particular education topics that you're dealing with. But of course, understand people may be hesitant to share their answers with the group. But it can help people as a group just talk about what does it mean to control your money? What does it mean if your finances control you? And so again, good potential conversation starters even in a group setting. Fourth, of course, really one of the things we really wanted to develop this scale for was to evaluate and improve programs. So you can use the scale to design more effective programs. So you can link your that you might be using in coaching or in financial education to people based on how they respond to scale questions. If they're more concerned about longer-term issues rather than shorter-term, again, you can use how people answer the questions to connect to the materials that you are going to work with them on or with. You can look at your materials you're using to see how well they align to what you're learning about the people, the financial well-being of the people you serve. And you can, of course, from a pure evaluation point of view, you can look at how individuals' financial well-being changes over time based on program activities, right? That would be really doing an evaluation to see if well-being goes up if you do different types of interventions. And in the long run, of course, we would love it if people were doing that, and we could all better learn what builds financial well-being. And the fifth, the fifth one and final idea on how you can use the scale is to measure and compare programs. So not just evaluate an individual program, but look across programs or look across clients. And this is particularly useful for people managing programs or funders who want to see how different programs are doing or what types of clients are being served by what types of programs. And that's where the standardization of the scale really helps with those comparisons. So you can report and share scores with other programs or funders, and some funders actually are starting to ask for the scale. You can look at how your clients are doing relative to other organizations that you might work with or partner with. You can look at different scores amongst people in different programs within your own organization, and you can compare scores to other survey data that you may have, or other well-being surveys or other types of data. So different ways you can kind of get a sense of the clients you're dealing with, how they compare to others at the start, how different programs are working. So a whole bunch of different things that you can do if you are scoring the scale. The last few tips before I quickly show you the hub, and this is somewhat summing up, but integrating the scale into your other data collection that you might be doing, you got to ask all the questions. You can't pick and choose questions. You can either do the 5 or the 10 question, but if you change questions, if you eliminate questions, if people skip questions, you can't score. It will not be valid. There's not flexibility there. You can always do the shorter one, but you can't say, oh, I don't like those ones, I'm going to choose different ones. You can if you use the fancy, complicated Stata statistical package, but probably most people aren't doing that. Second, you can't change the wording. It was rigorously tested as worded, and so if you make changes or if you if you kind of coach people on how to answer, that's going to make it no longer comparable. However, you can, because this is a public source, you can put your own logo on the scale. You can change the way it looks, but you shouldn't change anything else. And you can't put your logo on it if it also has ours on it. So either ours or yours, but not both. We do encourage people to calculate a score. A lot of groups use it and collect it but don't actually score it. We hope that over time, as the benchmarks are more used and there's more national data, you'll see the value of actually doing the scoring. And then lastly, if you can add it into your electronic data systems you're already using, your data collection systems, that's great. It helps people to use it better. Again, there are some quirks about that lookup table piece that can sometimes make that challenging. But there are some people who have figured out how to kind of overcome that. So, and this slide also sums up the same thing. Got to ask all the questions, avoid judgment, don't make people feel like there's any right answer. Listen, patient supportive. This is kind of basic, client interaction stuff. It depends, but generally you probably want some kind of baseline. I'll stop there. The others are kind of repeating what I said. Okay, now I'm going to quickly show you how to find everything you ever wanted to know about financial well-being on our website, and then we will hear from our guest speaker, which I'm very excited about. So the Financial WellBeing Hub is on our website as of last Thursday. The URL is at the bottom, but you'll note it's long and clunky. Practitioner resources / financial well-being resources. Probably the fastest way to get there is if you just go to our homepage, consumerfinance.gov. This is a screenshot. You will see where the red circle is. There is a section called Practitioner Resources up in the menu. That is a drop-down. If you click on that, you will see, this is the next slide. Note on the left, this is also how you can get to the adult financial education page, which has sort of a collection of all of our different handouts and resources and such. But if you see under programs, again, the big red circle shows you financial well-being resources. If you click on that, that will take you to it. So with 2 clicks, you can get to this without having to type in that long URL. And what you get when you do that, you will see this. Again, you won't be able to read everything because I know this is a screenshot. I'll just say a few words about it, but again, you can go explore it on your own. And this is only the top part of the page. This is the hub. A little bit of information up top. On the right, there's some reports that may catch your attention on financial well-being. Also, if you want to access the actual financial well-being data from our survey, you can download that. It's in the middle. There it says View the Data. But there are sections in this page. You can only see the top one right here. I'll show you the others in a minute. But once you're to this page, there are 3. So notice in the middle, too, there's our toolkit, the little blue box, pretty little blue box with a stethoscope. That's where you can get the electronic toolkit that I've been walking you through. The downloadable version of the toolkit that we've been looking at with the score ranges and all the other stuff all in one place. And then from this page, there are sections. There's Measure and Score Financial Wellbeing, Integrate Financial Wellbeing Scale, and Explore Financial Wellbeing Findings. So first, this is the Measure and Score Financial Wellbeing subpage, the top half of it. This is where you'll find things on actually using the scale, just how to actually do it. So the online questionnaire, there's a link to that. The user guide, which was the original user guide that came up with this a couple of years ago, is there. The English and Spanish versions, you can just see at the bottom of the screen, so you can actually get the paper scale, and the scoring worksheet. And then on the lower part of the page, if you were to scroll down, this is what you see. There's the 5-question scale in both English and Spanish, and then under Interpret the Score is where you can get single downloadable files with the score ranges, so that 0 to 37, 38 to whatever it was, 9, in one place, and then that comparison, the income and age comparison. They're all in the toolkit, but you can print out just those pages. At the bottom here, you'll see there's links for the ranges and the comparison groups. It's all the Measure and Score Financial Wellbeing part. It's sort of how to use it, or how to actually do the scale itself. The next section of the 3 pages is Integrate Financial Wellbeing Scale into your program. It has some of the content we just went through at the top of the page. At the bottom, to a digest on some of the things you can do around financial well-being is from a couple of years ago. And then at the bottom, some other organizations use the scale. There are 3 case studies in the printed toolkit. We're going to hear from one of those case studies today when Anais speaks in just a minute. We're very close to that now. the case, there are a couple pages in the toolkit, but there are 3 case studies. One, empowered a financial coaching organization in the Denver area, is using the scale in a number of ways, including facilitating conversation. Second case study, organization in Chicago called Center for Changing Lives, which is using it also in a number of ways directly with clients. And then the third one is an intermediate or funder, actually the United Way of the California Capital Region, that's Sacramento, which is requiring some of their financial coaching grantees to report on the scale, and so there's several groups there using it. And so you can read about all that in these case studies. So I won't go into them now for time reasons, and also because one of the case study participants is going to speak to us in 2 more slides, I think. So that was all the section. The third of the 3 subpages is Explore Financial Wellbeing Scale 5. And this is basically all of our research reports in one place. So Financial Wellbeing in America, the Pathways report that talks about financial skill, the Financial Skill Scale report, Building Blocks, which was looking at youth financial capability tied to financial well-being, a new report on financial well-being on older Americans, and we're looking to add things as we have additional reports coming out. So here you can kind of get all the, for people who want to dig into data and research, here's where you go. If you don't want that and just want to know how to use the scale, stay off this page. And now, my surprise slide before we go to Anais, and it says, for any of you who are researchers, but even practitioners using the scale, we have a upcoming call for financial well-being research papers coming out. Be in just a couple weeks in mid-February that this will go out, and where you can apply to receive support if you're already collecting data. It's not for new data collection, but if you're already collecting financial well-being data and want to do some analysis of it, or if you want to use our existing data set that's available, or some of the other national data sets for that are using the well-being scale, you can apply for support to analyze that, and it will culminate in a symposium at the end of this year where all those papers will be presented. So if you or anyone you know is interested, this call for papers is coming out soon. And I will just say we would love to have some practitioners, so not just the academic types applying, of course, doing their important analysis of data, but we would love to have folks who are using it in practice actually do some analysis of what they're finding in terms of what interventions might change scores and how much and how it relates to different factors. So there'll be more information on all this coming out, but hopefully Sue or people you know will be interested in seeing that. And now, finally, you have heard enough from me, I am sure. I would love to introduce Anais Gonzalez Castellano from Denver, from Lakewood, Colorado. She is a bilingual personal financial coach. She's also a data specialist. Anais, I took that out of your title because I couldn't make it all fit in one line, and it looked so sloppy when it wasn't in one line. But she actually does amazing work. Was an early adopter of the scale, both using it with clients as well as analyzing the scale data and thinking about how it could apply to evaluate programs and whatnot. So let me turn to Anais, but were there any questions that came in that we should address before that?
Actually, there were. We had a question about languages, and this person said that actually, Roland said, we serve many clients who are monolingual in a wide variety of languages: Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Burmese, Thai, Tongan, and several other languages. And to know how she could account for changes to the language that arises from translation. And I did respond and tell her that, we have it in Spanish, so it's ready to go there, but typically assessments need to be validated after they're translated. And so I'm not sure if we're planning on doing that with future languages, but I know typically we don't most psychometricians don't recommend that you just translate something and then start administering it. We do actually, we have translated it into Spanish, yes, we know, but into Chinese, but I don't think we've released it yet. We've got a backlog of translated stuff being audited. Right now, we don't have immediate plans to do any other languages, but you do raise an interesting point, Heather, that you can and use it yourselves. That it may not be quite, the comparability will be different, I think, because the wording was very carefully tested. So that is the downside
that we would love to do more languages over time, but right now it's Spanish, and soon the Chinese one will be released.
Let's get two more questions. Rosalind also asked, one thing we've noticed doing pre and post surveys is the scores change only slightly before and after an intervention. Do you have any info on if this is a similar experience with other programs?
Excellent question, and actually something we are very interested in. We refer to it as what is a meaningful change, right? If we don't want people to say, oh, we expect something to go up by 20 points when actually that's not, realistic. So we don't. I have only anecdotal answers to that, and Anais can probably address this in a minute. But the order of magnitude that we've heard about, so it's highly anecdotal, is it's going to go up 3 to 5 points over 6 months. Depending on they could go up a little more. I think one of our case studies said they were seeing things going up by 8 points. But it kind of depends on who you're working with. We've heard people say that it often will dip initially as people dig deeper into their finances and say, "Oh my God," and then may go up. So we'd love to learn more about that. But I think it's important to realize that people aren't going to go, from the lowest score band to like medium high, with a few months intervention, right? These are longer term issues. But again, that's something we'd love to hear from all of you about who are using Scale. Do you want to quickly ask the last one, Heather, and then I really want to give the rest of the time to Anais?
Absolutely. It sounds like that good question might be an opportunity for some research that someone might want to go after your opportunity you gave.
Right.
Let's see. A last question that we have here was from Anne, and she said, is there experience integrating scores and or questions with the outcome tracker?
I guess I would need to know which outcome tracker. So that'd be like software-specific question, which I might not be able to answer, since I'm not sure which one she's referring to.
Yeah, I think she's speaking to an actual software tool called Outcome Tracker.
Okay. Let's hear from Anais, and if you want to details, although I only know a little bit about how the score interacts with a couple of software programs. That may be something that we need to explore, and I'd love to explore with users through an informal users group going forward. So we might not be able to answer that on this call, but feel free to send a little more via the chat. So let's see, Anais, are you with us?
I am here.
Yay! Thank you so much, and I really appreciate your presumably yourself out of the Denver snowstorm of a couple of days ago enough to be able to do this. You have been an early adopter and have a lot of. I think you were the first group that ever actually sent us like, hey, here's what we found, and I'm using it with clients. So I would love to give you some time to tell us about your experience with the scale. Go ahead.
So first I wanted to share a little bit about why we decided to try the scale in the first place. As I mentioned, I am a personal finance coach and a data specialist for Empowered, and we're a small nonprofit, Metro Denver, providing personal finance coaching, financial education classes, and debt management plans to our community. The one-on-one personal finance coaching, we really wanted to find a way to get a sense of how people feel about their financial security, not just follow some of the metrics we see, such as increased savings, increased credit score, reduced debt, but how does a client feel about where they are in their financial journey? Our mission is actually to empower people to transform their financial futures, and we want to make sure we honor the client's values and provide a positive judgment-free space so that they can improve financial circumstances. We're really trying to find something that's a little bit more qualitative or a little bit more focused on the person's perception of their financial security. And we ran into the Financial WellBeing Scale in late 2016, and we thought that it was a great complement to what we were already tracking, those actual financial changes. And we piloted it for a few months and found that it led to some very interesting conversations with our clients that really addressed their main fears and concerns about their financial habits and financial future. In 2017, we were fortunate enough that we were able to add this financial well-being scale to our intake. We use an online platform called Change Machine from the Financial Clinic to track all of our coaching clients, and they were very helpful in allowing us to add the full scale of 10 questions to our intake process. And we are trying to continue to ask our clients every 3 months or after sessions, for example, to update how they feel about their financial security. So the scale has been a very important part of our coaching model, and we've noticed very interesting correlations between brief debt, for example, and an increase in the score. In fact, I just looked at our 2018 score changes for the well-being scale, and we noticed that for 2018, clients actually increased their well-being score on an average of 7 points, just to put things in perspective. So it's not, as Irene was saying, it's not a huge shift that occurs immediately. We're talking about fear around money, and that's a very deep, complex issue. We've been able to measure that 7 points in 1 year has been the average result for those of us that have met with us at least 3 times. So I don't know if there's any specific questions that people would like for me to address or curiosity about how we implemented it, but I'm happy to answer anything that comes along.
Anais, can you tell us a little bit about, because I did bring this up earlier, about client reaction and also maybe the reaction of the coaches and how they've dealt with the about how you actually do it, sort of how conversation go with a client, how do they react, how do you, when do you actually administer it in the session? Give a little flavor for that.
Actually, as you can imagine, these are very personal questions, and some people, we find that they express that they have never thought about these things before. So I'd say one of the most interesting reactions from clients is that they're not even sure that they didn't even know that was an important question. And once they ask themselves that, they realize, this actually does impact how I feel about my financial future. So just that self-reflection was really powerful. But there's a lot of emotion sometimes, especially because we like to ask more probing questions around answers. So I'll have open-ended questions to see how if they want more about why they feel a certain way. So sometimes a lot about their personal lives and about any deep-seated financial habits that they might have. You know, a lot about how their parents handled money and so on, and really helps us as a coach really identify what financial habits we need to address to help and achieve financial security, but also just understand the complexity of the client situation and honor that and work with that so that we can focus on what the client really needs to do to achieve their goals.
I assume you are not sharing the score, is that right? Are you telling people it's a scale or just saying, hey, we're going to ask you these questions? How do you actually describe it to the client?
Great. So I mentioned it's part of our intake, so it is done towards the beginning of the first appointment, and follow up. It depends on the coach when they feel it's appropriate to bring it up, usually towards the end of a session after the conversation has wrapped up. But generally speaking, you do not share the score with the client. We explain that these questions are just to help us understand how they're feeling about their finances, and that we will ask those questions again in the future to track the changes over time. But we are very transparent in the sense that we share with clients, if you do want to look at your score over time, we are happy to share that with you personally. It's just not something that we've added to the coaching appointment. It's more for us to determine another type of impact that we're making as an organization that can be tracked besides numbers and figures.
Been from the other coaches? I know it's voluntary within your organization, right? And I know you've been a proponent. Have the other coaches found it helpful? Have they had challenges? It's very interesting to hear about how that adoption process goes.
But it is no longer optional at our organization. We really like where it leads us in terms of conversations, and so we're trying to do it more regularly. Like I said, we're kind of expecting coaches to do it at least once a quarter with their clients. A lot of coaches love the conversations that result from the questions because it gives us a more complete understanding of the client's circumstances. And we notice a lot of discrepancies, too, where a client might say that they feel, okay, their savings accounts, but then they answer a question by saying, I am concerned that the money I have or will save won't last, answer it in a negative way. So it helps us as coaches identify where the discrepancies in behavior and actions, in thoughts and actions that we see from clients. So it's been challenging mostly due to the logistics of it. Because it's hard for us to score it in real time. We have to kind of analyze the data on a quarterly basis because it's a little complicated to score at that moment. So I would say that that's the biggest obstacle, but overall positive results from both client and coaches.
Right. You know, one of the other groups that we did a case study on said that they in some cases, will have people answer the questions in one session and say, we'll discuss it next time, and then they score, because they have in-the-moment scoring, they score it and discuss the overall kind of, so not the number, but at least the whole, what they learn from it at a future session. So you can think, too, about kind of doing it as a two-part piece, just thinking about that, the challenge of scoring. By the way, I noticed one question about just one of the questions that came in through the Q&A. Other people need to register to access this questionnaire. I should have said this up front. The Financial WellBeing Scale, this is a public resource. We are a federal agency. It is free. It is available to anyone who wants to use it. As I've said, you can even put your own logo on it and make it look different. Just don't change the questions. But use it however you want. If you hand score it, you track the data yourself. If you use our online version, I won't store it for you, but you can just you can print out actually what you're seeing for each individual client and keep that. So, no, this is completely open to anyone who wants to use it. That's the advantage to being a public resource. Almost at the top of the hour, but let's have a quick opportunity. And this is great. I'm sure people have a million questions, and this makes me think that at some point we should just have an hour where people talk about their use of the scale and the things that they're learning. But let's do a quick check to see if there's any voice questions. And I know we're basically out of time, but operator, can you just quickly let people have the opportunity explain to us how to do that?
Certainly. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1 from your phone and unmute your line. Speak clearly when prompted by the automated system. If to withdraw your question, please press *2. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and speak your name clearly when prompted. Please stand by for any phone questions.
And there's so much I would love to ask Anais if I had that.
Irene, this is Heather. You might want to advance to the last slide while people are asking questions.
Yes, good idea. And this is just our resources slide. That's right. I got stuck on Anais's introductory slide. But again, the URL for the Wellbeing Resources page, and again, you can also get to it through the menu that I showed you before. The URL for our general financial educators page, the FinX email address, and then a link for our financial education discussion group. There's all kinds of other interesting questions coming in, but we are getting short on time. Let's say quickly, are there any voice questions, operator?
We have a question on the phone. One moment.
Okay. I think this
question is from Erica Baldwin. Your line is open.
Yeah, how to get access to the scale again, the Well Financial scale that was laid in the beginning.
Well, if you are able to see the screen now, it's the URL that's up there. So again, not catchy, but consumerfinance.gov /practitioner-resources financial-well-being-resources. But if you just go to consumerfinance.gov, to be honest, if you just use the search bar and said Financial WellBeing, there's that whole page on it, and the scale itself, there's both the paper version that you can download and the online version. So it's all on that hub I showed you. And again, all available. You can use it depending on whether you want the paper versus the online, but it is all there. This was your question. I see lots of other questions, but we really are out of time. So I think we will stop here. I always love it when there's more to be said at the end of a call. So I'm going to thank everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Anais. I really would have loved to have heard a whole lot more from you, but I think that at least gives people a little flavor for how one group is using it. And again, they're a case study in the toolkit, so you can see a little bit more. It's short, but a little bit more in the toolkit that we've been walking through today. Why don't we stop there? And if you have additional questions or thoughts, you can email them to the FinX inbox, CFPB_NEX@CFPB.gov, which Heather monitors, can send any questions to me or to anyone else that would be appropriate to answer them. So why don't we stop here? Go ahead, Heather. Yes.
There's a question about more details on the February proposal for the grant. Is there any email that we can supply for more information on that?
Not till it. So what happens in February is we put out the call for papers. That's will have the criteria, all the information, and then there's a month or two before you actually apply. So it will kind of be. It'll all be announced. We're kind of giving you an early heads up. And Heather, maybe we could send that call for papers out through the FinX newsletter as well. That
sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. So that's all we can say right now. It'll all be kind of announced, as we said, likely in mid-February. I do hope some practitioners will apply for that. So I think anything else we need to do before we?
No, but I'd just like to thank you and Anais for such a wonderful and interesting presentation. I'm very excited to see how others are going to be using this, and I love your idea of an entire webinar to hear how practitioners are using it in the future. So hopefully that's something we can work together on.
Everybody?
Participation in today's conference may disconnect at this time.